All right, welcome to another edition. I'm so excited about this edition of the Living Boldly with a Purpose podcast because sometimes you never know where they're going to go. You kind of have an idea. Sometimes I meet with guests that I've never talked to before, and that's just not the case on this one because James and I got to have a conversation about a month ago, and just found out that we had so many different things that are in common, so many different things that we both wanted to enjoy and talk about and just explore. I guess just the wonderful things that I believe God is leading us towards tonight. And so we are broadcasting this live today. And so if you're watching right now, just sit back and enjoy. If you are watching the recording, this is the beauty of, James, this is the beauty of recording, and something that I didn't know. I try to tell my listeners that if you are watching this as a recording, you know what? If there's something that you really want to write down, try not to write it all down while we're talking because you might miss a little bit of it. Go ahead and push pause, write it down, and then push go again. I don't know how many podcasts that I watched or how many times I was listening to stuff trying to get everything written down. Oh, that's a great point. Let me write it down. Oh, I just missed this. And didn't realize, like, oh, yeah, the pause button works so good that you just hit pause, write it down, then hit play again. It is so cool. But maybe you're walking or maybe you're out and you're doing something, where you're listening to it. You're not doing the video, you're doing the audio, which is also cool. And you can get that done as well. Go home and watch it again because we're just, I have a feeling we're gonna get deep about some of the subjects today, but we're gonna have fun talking about a life and where it goes and what we're doing and how we fit into what does it mean to live boldly with purpose and what does God have for us as we're doing that and what are the expectations and just some fun things that I've been thinking about and notes that I've taken and want to just make sure that we talk about. And so James has a podcast. It's called The Bible Speaks to You Podcast. It is a great podcast. I want to encourage you to look it up. It's wherever podcasts are at. If you type The Bible Speaks to You Podcast, it's on the screen right now. If you can't remember it, you can write it down. Go check it out. And we can just, have some fun as we talk today. And for those of you that might be watching live, if you do have a comment or something, I'll be able to see those. I think that we're live on YouTube, on Facebook, and on Instagram. And so one of you on those, you can go ahead and put a comment on one of those. We'll see if we can answer that. We'll do our best to. I am not that technologically inclined to be able to do that all the time. And here's what's sad about me saying that, right? I tell people now I'm not technology inclined. And my master's is in educational technology. That's what I got my master's in. But it was back in the day, like when I started teaching teachers how to use technology in the classroom, like one of the things that I taught people how to use was an overhead projector. And we had like a 1 hour lesson on the great uses of an overhead projector. For those of you who are young out here and don't know what an overhead projector is, you don't need to know because you'll never use it in your lifetime. We had laser discs. That was like a big thing that came out. I taught how to do stuff on the VCR and how to do that. I taught a graduate class when we were. It was on web pages when they first came out. So we're like pre-internet when we're using a thing called FredMail. For those of you guys who get mad when you email, like you send an email out to somebody and you ask, do you have it? Do you have it? Do you have it? And sometimes you have to wait probably less than 1 minute to get your email and you're impatient about it. When we started sending it, it was called FredMail. And we were so excited because I could send one. I was in Southern California at the time, James. So I could send it from Southern California to you in Connecticut. And it would take about 3 days to get there. But we were excited because we didn't have to spend money on a stamp. We didn't have to spend money on, on any of. We could get an email there, and then you could respond to it in another 3 days, and we could do email that way. Imagine today's youth if they had to wait 3 days for an email to be sent and me come over. But like one server at nighttime would call every night at 5 o'clock, and it would download everything there. Then it would call another one, and it was such a cool thing. I was telling you about the website. We created a website at the graduate class I was teaching, and there was like 12 students, and we did a 4-page website. And it took us the whole semester to write a 4-page, because we had to code every bit of it. There was code that hadn't been written yet. We were like somewhere like 1,500 in the world web page that had ever been made. And we were so excited. And so now I don't even know how to do the technology because everything is so quick. It's so fast. It's so exciting. Oh, man. But we're here and we are using this technology and we're going to have some fun. So, James, thank you for being on today. Before we get into the deep on the deep stuff, I want to know a little bit about you. Some people, as I do this, people say, well, what books did you publish, or what does he do for a living, or, all those wonderful things. But what I find is so unique is when we talk about who the person really is. Because when I think of, if we're going to be able to become the person that God put us on this earth to be, how do we do that if all we talk about is what we do? And so in order to get to know us, in order to kind of develop some of the trust, I love people to tell their story. And I know your story goes from, back in the day when you was in Texas to where you're at in Connecticut now. But I want you to tell your story, the parts of your story that you love to tell. And here's what, sometimes I get guests and they're worried about, what are we going to talk about? I don't know if I have all the answers. And, James already knows this because he has a podcast and he has guests that are like something like that. But, our guests can't get these wrong, because even if you made it up, James, you would be right. There's no way that I would ever even know, so thank you for telling us. I do want you to tell us what you do a little bit, but go ahead and tell us your story so we get to know you, and then we'll jump in and have some fun.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you, Dr. Brian. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and to talk to you. And I'm looking forward to our conversation and sharing some ideas with your listeners. I live in Connecticut, as you said, and I do have a podcast called The Bible Speaks to You, and it's been going about 5.5 years now. But I want to go back to some of the things that were really formative in my life as a kid and in high school and stuff like that, because I look back now and see those events. Sometimes they were just something very quick and short, but they really have had an effect on me as an adult. The first one I'm thinking of is I was probably in about the 5th grade. And just as a little background, I grew up in a very Bible oriented family. We had a little Bible devotional every day. We'd read a chapter in the Bible or share things. We talked about the Bible. We went to church and Sunday school, all that sort of thing. So I was very comfortable with that. I loved the Bible. I had my own Bible. I would read it sometimes before I went to bed. Well, one time I was in about the 5th grade, and I don't remember what I did or said, but I said or did something that was very inappropriate to my mother. I either told her to shut up, or I don't remember what it was. Oh, I mean, I got mad. I got mad at her. I don't remember what it was, but she said, "I'm going to tell your father when you come home."
Ooh, I remember
And
those. I
oh,
remember
yeah,
those.
and it's
Oh,
like,
gosh.
that put the fear in me, and so I said, "Oh, please don't tell father that whatever it was." And I bargained and I pleaded with her, and she finally said, "Okay, if you will memorize the 10 commandments, not the little short version, but the whole long thing." We're talking King James version with all the little details, especially there in some of those. "If you will memorize those and recite them to me, I will not tell your father. And you also have to ask God to forgive you." Man, I started studying those 10 commandments, and I knew them. We talked about them sometimes when in Sunday school and also at home, but I could not recite them. So I got to work on that. But then the part that really got to me was when she said, "You need to ask God to forgive you." Now, I had been a prayerful person up to that point, but they were the little prayers you say at mealtime or the Lord's Prayer. It was more of a recitation prayer. I had never, that I remember looking back, I don't remember ever talking to God like you would if you're asking someone to forgive you. And so I don't know that I did the best job at that, but it was the first attempt. It was the first effort. The first time I felt like I was working on my relationship with God because my mom wanted me to have that direct relationship, that direct contact with God. And I don't know that that was her motive for doing that, but she was just like, you did something wrong. You need to ask God to forgive you. Well, that's the effect it had on me. And that got me starting to think, oh, I can talk to God in my prayers, not just say the words. Um, Another thing that really was two things that happened to me in high school. Um, I had gotten serious about my faith and not just going to church because my parents took me, but because I wanted to go in high school. And um, one week in the Bible study program I was doing at the time had that verse where it says, if you say you love God but hate your brother, you're a liar. Because how can you say you love someone you don't see, but you don't love someone you do see? And I thought, oh no, I have a little brother. I did not like my little brother. He could just look at me and make me mad. I look back now and realize I let myself be influenced by him. He didn't have the power over me. I gave it to him. I just would lose my temper. I would beat him up. I was really
Oh
mean to my
gosh.
little brother. This is terrible. And I read this verse and I thought, oh no. Well, I say I love God. I must be a liar because I don't really love my little brother. I do not love my little brother. And I realized, oh no, I'm going to have to love my little brother. And I made a conscious choice to start loving him. And I did. And I mean, it was pretty bad because my parents just didn't know what to do with me. They tried to keep us from fighting, and I just my temper was out of control sometimes. Well, after 2 or 3 weeks, they all wondered what happened to you, James, because I wasn't beating up my little brother anymore.
Oh, wow.
And so they saw the difference. I saw the difference. My brother really felt the difference. I talked to him recently about this. He said, oh, yeah, I noticed.
He knew. Wow.
And so what that did for me was I realized my faith is something that has to be put into practice. It's not just an intellectual, theological um, thing. It is a feet on the ground, rubber hits the road type of a thing. I need to practice the things that the Bible tells me to do. Love your neighbors yourself. Love your brother. Those kinds of things. And the thing that really then clinched all that, and this has to do directly with the title of your podcast. When I was, I don't know, maybe a junior in high school, maybe a senior, um, I watched on TV that famous movie, The Ten Commandments with Charlton Heston. And
Yeah.
I was deeply moved. And you look at it now and it's kind of hokey. It's kind of, the cinematography was good some places. You could see where they sort of fudged on things. But the storyline is really good. And there were just parts in there that just moved me deep from within when Moses went and talked to the burning bush, for example. And
Mhm.
all of a sudden, and he was thinking like, oh, I have a purpose. And uh, all of a sudden I felt, oh, God has a purpose for me. And that really has put me on a path not to try to do what I want to in my life, but to do what God's purpose is for me, to discover what his purpose for me is. Um, and it was maybe 2 or 3 years after that. I don't remember the exact time frame, but I was at a big church meeting. There were hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people, and I don't remember anything else that was said, but some lady got up and said her simple little prayer had been for many years, "Dear God, prepare me for what you have prepared for me."
Mhm.
And I really took that deep inside me, and I remember it to this day, and I have constantly, well, not every minute of every day, but I have consistently come back to that prayer. It's like, okay, God, what do you want me to do? What is your will for my life? What is your purpose? I mean, I could do lots of different things. I'm a smart guy. You're a smart guy. We could all do lots of things. We all have lots of talents, but God, what do you want me to do? And so the rest of my life since then, over the last 50, 60, whatever years it is, has been trying to discover what that is. And, you think you have an idea, and I've done lots of things in my life. I've been in sales. I've trying to understand marketing. When we started our family, I was a full-time stay-at-home dad for 10 years. I didn't work. I did all the things a housewife would normally do, and I loved it. It was a lot of work, made me appreciate everything. Anyone who stays home and takes care of the kids full-time. I have 3 little kids. And I felt at some point, well, my life is not amounting to much. Here I am changing diapers. But God revealed to me that that was my job, and I could do it with a full sense of purpose and put it on my resume if I ever went and applied for a job again. And so, um, after that period in my life was over, after about 10 years, I was trying to figure out what to do, and I tried all kinds of stuff. And each step along the way, I learned a skill that has put me where I'm now. And if you're watching this, you can see that I have a little recording studio here. I did voiceover work for, several years, and I was doing all right. But I realized, you know what? God has put a message in my heart. Why should I be reading somebody else's message when God has put something in my heart to share? So uh, that's kind of what got me to think about having a podcast. Well, back in 2008, someone asked me to help them with their prison ministry. And this is probably one of the most formative things that has happened to me as far as a sense of purpose goes. I started going every week to the Danbury, Connecticut Federal Correctional Institution doing a Bible study each week, as I said. And over time, I found kind of a rhythm, a way to share ideas from the Bible, a way to present ideas that was not judgmental of someone, was not dictatorial. I wasn't telling people what they had to believe. We were looking at Bible stories and events and saying, well, what's the lesson here? What did these people do? What did they do right? What mistakes did they make? What did they learn from it? What can we learn from this? How can we apply these ideas in our own life? And people would come up to me and say, "Oh, Mr. Early, you have transformed my life. You have renewed my faith." I got all these amazing compliments because of how I was working with these people, and it made a difference in their life. I thought, I got to find some way to share these ideas on a larger scope. And that's when I started my podcast about 5.5 years ago. And so just to kind of close this whole story part of the conversation here, over the last 5.5 years, I've been doing my podcast, and it has opened my eyes to what I feel is the real need in the world, and even I'll say in the Christian world. A lot of people in the Christian world, if you go on social media, they're all debating. Everybody's saying, oh, my church is right, yours is wrong. The Catholics are saying, well, we're the ones that are right. And the Greek Orthodox saying, no, we're the ones that are right. The Baptists are saying, we're the ones that are right. Everybody's saying, we're right. This is why you should come to our church. And they're arguing and debating theology. And one person will send everyone else to hell, and then that person will send other people to hell. It's like that's not exactly their job. And so it's like, that is way above anybody's pay grade. I don't care how much of a theologian you are and how much you think that how much you believe you're right, your interpretation of the Bible is right. That's not for anyone to decide. So I'm kind of done with all these theological debates. I used to be that guy, love to try to prove that I was right and everybody else was wrong. And, that's not the way Jesus conducted his ministry.
No, he didn't. No.
He was all about put this stuff into practice. Here's some ideas. You practice these in your daily life. If you want to be my follower, do these things. Think this way. Forgive, love, treat people with loving kindness and compassion. forgive them, that sort of thing. So now my whole focus is with my podcasts and all the other things I'm doing, is learning how to embrace the mindset of Jesus. Paul says we have the mind of Christ. Well, we should act it like that a little more,
Yes.
you know? And so now I've kind of gone another step with that. And it's basically my message is helping people think, pray, and love like Jesus.
Okay.
And you know what? We can disagree on almost any theological point, but if we can agree on we need to think and pray and love like Jesus, then that's gonna solve a lot of the problems that we have with each other. And so that's what my whole purpose is right now, is to help people do that and
Mhm.
and help people realize they can. I mean, it's pretty audacious to say, "Oh, you can love the way Jesus did," but it is possible. He said, "Whoever believes on me can do the same things that I did, even greater things." Well, if Jesus loved that way, then we can love that way. We can follow his example. We can think about life the way he did. So I'm doing that with I do some coaching I to help people in this mindset of Jesus approach to
Mhm.
life. Um, I I have a podcast, obviously, as we've talked about. Um, I do online classes and things like that. I've been mentoring some churches, trying to help them rediscover their sense of purpose in their community, sharing the message of Christ, sometimes with their own members, and also reaching out to the community. You know, I'm looking. I'd love to be a speaker on at events. I'm just looking for any way that I can get this message out there that we need to quit fighting among ourselves as Christians. What if today, I know this is kind of a pie in the sky idea, but what if we as Christians quit arguing and fussing and debating each other theologically and focus on just loving
Oh my
like
God.
Jesus did, treating people the way he did? I think the world would feel the difference overnight. And so that's who I am. That's what I'm trying to help people do.
Well, thank you for sharing that. There's so many questions jumped in my mind, and so many parts of your story. It's like, well, should I start here? Should I start here? But when you talked about loving like Jesus, and then I was hearing your story, and I think for a lot of us, we get to this place where we don't believe we're enough. I know when you talked about the story when you were beating up your brother, and then your mom said that you had to ask for forgiveness. And one of the things that you said, I don't think I did a really good job of asking for forgiveness, right? Because we believe that we can't do that. We fast forward. I don't know if I did a really good job as a dad. I love doing what I was doing. We always, and for I think for all of us, we spend this time thinking, well, we're supposed to do it this certain way before God will accept who we are as we showed up. And then I think of like when there's anything we've ever tried to do, and it's the way he designed us, like if we try to walk or we try to eat or we try to do any of the things we've ever tried to do in our lives, we're not good at it when we first start trying to do it. And
Right.
yet we expect that God expects us to be really good. Like we have the right prayer to say, always have the right words to say to him when we're praying, or we always treat each other the right way. And we think we've come short because we don't know how to do it really well when we first start. What would you say about being enough as part of just the issues that we've had in organized religion and everything else? Is this feeling that God somehow doesn't love us enough if we mess up?
You know, I love that question, Brian, and I think, we really have to get past the limitations that are associated with that mindset. In one way, just as people are never enough.
No, of course not.
Because even if you have all the answers, the human mind, the human heart, the human emotions can't grasp the infinite nature of God's love and
Mhm.
grace. We can begin to think and talk about it, but in another sense, we are totally enough. God has made us in his image and likeness. And I think the problem is we look at ourselves from this limited perspective of what we see in the mirror, what we remember of our past, what other people tell us that we can or can't do something. And we start associating ourselves with this, um, who we have been in the past. And we think that's who we are, that's our identity. And if that's the case, of course, that's never enough. That you can't. Even Jesus said,
I'll come short.
even Jesus said, I can't do anything by myself.
Yes, he did. Wow.
Oh my. Now we got to remember that. So, you know, sometimes we get pretty full of ourselves. We think, oh, I can do whatever I want to, or I can do anything with God's help. Well, he said, I only do what I see the Father do. Anything I see the Father do, I can do too. Well, I think that's true for you and me too. We just don't see what the Father's doing because we're so focused on ourselves or our own limitations or whatever. But I think it comes down to identity, because when you start to realize and accept the full implication of the fact that God made you, God made me, God made all of us in his image and likeness. Well, that's how Jesus would say, whatever I see the Father do, I can do, because if you stand in front of the mirror and you lift your arm up, your reflection in the mirror lifts its arm up. Reflection in the mirror can't do that by itself. You know, it's because God has empowered us to do whatever we do. And so to me, yeah, we can't do anything by ourselves, but we can do everything if it's empowered by God. And so it really is a question maybe of, well, God is enough to work through me. God can do whatever he wants to through me. And I may humanly mess up, not understand, do it wrong, but that doesn't stop God from doing whatever he's doing. Um, and I think on a more practical level, I want to share a story that an experience I had. Oh gosh, this was a long time ago, but uh, back to this idea of loving like Jesus does.
Mhm.
Uh, I was living in Boston at the time, and it was my day off, and I had an appointment with the people to come and put storm windows on my apartment because
Mhm.
they wanted to save electricity, whatever. So I didn't have any Windex, and I needed to run out and get some Windex to clean the windows because I didn't want them to put the storm windows over the dirty windows. Well, in my prayer time that morning, I was praying, and I realized, among other things, that I was afraid to love as much as Jesus did, because look what they did to him.
Mm.
And so I said to myself, okay, James, just for today, I'm not going to make any commitments past today, but just for today, I refuse to be afraid to love as much as Jesus did. Well, I looked at my watch. The guys were coming in like an hour, and I wanted to make sure I had time. So I ran down the street, went down my block, crossed the street, and started down toward this little convenience store to get some Windex.
Mhm.
Well, just after I crossed the cross street and started heading down the block, this guy, he looked like he was a homeless person. It was a hot summer morning, already very hot. He had on a thick wool coat that was covered in grime. His face was scarred, and his hair was matted with grease and dirt. He smelled like he'd been sleeping in the sewer. And he walked right up to me and he said, I need $2 for a drink. Now, if you live in a city like Boston, New York, wherever, you see these kinds of people, and it's easy to just say, sorry, buddy, or maybe you give them a couple of bucks, or you just look at the ground and you try to pretend like you didn't see him. Well, this guy came right up to me, and I just had this prayer that I wasn't going to be afraid to love as much as Jesus did. And I looked right at him and I said, you don't need a drink. You just need to feel loved. And he started crying. And I didn't do this on purpose. It just happened. My arm, I went over, I came over to him. I put my arm around him, and he was just bawling like a baby. We went and sat down on the stoop. You know, those old houses where they have the whole first flight of stairs on the outside, this
Yeah.
big stoop. So we sat on one of those, and this is on Columbus Avenue in Boston. And I just listened to his story. He had been a deacon in his church, and 20 years before that, he had done something really bad. Like he almost killed someone. Whatever it was, I didn't want to ask him again, but that's the sense I got. He'd almost killed someone, and his church, his family, his friends, everybody told him God would never forgive him. And so he was in for 20 years. He'd been carrying this burden around. I said, "Hey, God can forgive you right this moment." And I shared some stuff from the Bible. He just drank it in like a
Mhm.
thirsty sponge. And I shared some other ideas and stuff, and we talked, and all in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, I got to go get the Windex. But I just felt, but I could not leave this guy there. I felt so much compassion and love for this man. I just talked to him like I'm talking to you. It wasn't like, oh, holy me, I'm talking to this poor soul that needs help. I was talking to him like a brother. And I felt so much love for him. Well, after about 10 minutes, he said, "You know what? I don't want that drink anymore. I should get something to eat." I mean, there was a visible change in his demeanor and his
Wow.
attitude, the tone of his voice, everything. And I said, "You know what? I'm going to give you a couple of bucks." And at the time, there was this little diner down the street where he could get a sandwich for $2. So, um, anyway, then I said, "Look, I've got to run get some Windex from the store down here." I wanted to get his name and his address and send him something to read. I said, "Come with me because I got to get this Windex." So when he stood up, he said, "You know what? My stomach was all full of cramps, and I feel so much better now." And I said, "Wow, that's amazing." And then he said, "You know what? I never come into the city at this time of day during the week. He lived out in Roxbury or some one of the suburbs, or that's what
Mhm.
he told me." And I said, "I'm never out this time of day either." I said, "I think God brought us together." If I had been 30 seconds later, he would have crossed the street and I wouldn't have seen him. If I'd been a minute or two sooner, I would have been in the little convenience store. I mean, God just brought us together. And first I thought, "Oh, God, because of my little prayer to love like Jesus did, God put this guy was already like for an hour on the way to would have taken him an hour to get from where he lived to where he was. So God just brought me in on the last minute."
Yes. Oh my gosh. Or God might have planted the
And
baby for.
yeah, exactly. And so he gave me the idea I needed to confront that fear that I couldn't love as much as Jesus, because by myself, I could not love as much as Jesus. But with the mind of Christ, I could.
Mhm.
And so that's what I'm really saying all that to address your question. We can't do things by ourselves with our own human minds, our own, however talented or smart we are. We just, you can't follow Jesus' example that way. It has to be resigning, surrendering those things and embracing the mind of Christ, learning to love and think and pray like he did. And so, yes, we are capable of that with God's help, but not by ourselves.
Absolutely. Well, and you think of, just you bring, we can't do anything. As I was out there, God created us to create, I believe. And so I was out there creating my lawn, the best that I could, right? And putting the plants and the flowers and all that in the right spot. But to your point, I can't be the son who grows the grass that turns it green. I can't take
Yeah.
the water that I put on it and make it and make I the burnt patches in there. All I need everything that he's giving us to be able to create anything at all, which is just
Eh,
it's so amazing. Another thing that I want to just the kind of and hopefully we can unpack this a little bit, but when you talk about loving like Christ loved and us having the ability to do that, and we feel like we're not, like I said at the beginning, we're probably not enough. But more so, what you didn't say is God is created to love like Christ means that we need to judge. And I think of a lot of our issues with all the world religions that have been there is that we start with the judgment part. And I just go back to your story that you were just telling. You could have judged that man based on his appearance, based on his smell, based on him asking you for a drink, all of those things. And you're trying to love like Christ loved. But if you were to turn around and judge first, that conversation doesn't happen. You don't have a transformation time in his life. And if there would be one thing that we could take away that would bring us together, I think it's this judgmental attitude that, like you said, I'm right, you're wrong. I read this is how I interpreted these scriptures. And because you didn't interpret it like I interpreted it, or God didn't speak to you the way that I believe he spoke to me, I'm now going to judge you on how you respond to it. How do you help people through that process of judging? Because we all do. We all do it because of who we're humans, and that's who we are. But at the same time, to love more like Christ, how do we do that?
That's a good question. I don't think I have the perfect answer, but there's several things that have helped me. And one is when I have felt judged unjustly by someone, it makes me realize I don't want to do that to someone else. And so when I'm working with somebody as a coaching client or in my prison ministry, I'll say, I try to put it back on them and see, have you ever felt someone misjudged you based on your appearance or your history or, the fact, especially the ladies and the men in prison that I work with, a lot of times they feel like once they get out, people are going to judge them because they've been incarcerated. And I say, okay, so you have to face that. And so they know what that feels. And I think usually even if we are right, somebody else might be right or more right than we are. And I think it takes a lot of maturity to realize another thing that's helped me is admitting, even when I think I'm right, like in a theological conversation, say, well, you know what? I could be wrong. I don't think I am, but I could be wrong. And I could be, I'm willing to go there. And I think it's about the humility. Even Paul had the humility to say, we see things through a glass darkly. I don't understand everything now, but I will. And I think these people who speak with such self-appointed authority on what the Bible says or just in anything, they're so sure they're right. They need to remember that humility of Paul. He spoke with bold authority and a deep sense of purpose, but he also had the humility to say, I don't understand everything. I don't claim to know everything. And we need to be that way sometimes.
Yeah, so much that I just think through. Somebody told me that I know I'm 100% right. I'm 100% right to know that there's this 50% chance that I'm wrong. And so I love that thought process, is because we do. When I think about some of the stuff that's not even in the Bible that somebody pulled out of the Bible. So that, for instance, let's say that there was a denomination or a church denomination that said that it was wrong to dance, and they're 100% right that you can't dance or you're going to go to hell or whatever it is that they would put on folks. And then you read how much David danced down the streets, and then somebody else says, well, I'm dancing like David danced. And then you go, okay, can both people be right at the same time? Or does there have to be a wrong and a right in every situation?
One thing that's helped me, that's a really good point. And one thing that's helped me a lot is working with these people in my prison ministry, because I have people from lots of different denominational backgrounds. And I realized I'm not trying to get them to agree on theological stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm realizing we're seeing things from different perspectives. And there are a couple of analogies that have helped me. Like, let's say you and I, Brian, sitting at the table across from each other, and in the middle of the table are the salt and the pepper.
Mhm.
Now, for me, the salt is on the left and the pepper is on the right, but you're sitting across from me. So to you, the salt is on the right and the pepper is on the left. Who is right? We're both right from the perspective that we're looking at it from. Or you could use the idea of a lens. If you're looking at something through a red tinted lens, everything's going to look red. If I'm looking through a green tinted lens, everything is going to look green. If I'm looking at the Bible through a lens of God being this mean, wrathful, vindictive God that's ready to punish you every 5 minutes, you're going to read the Bible very differently than if you think of looking through the lens of God being a loving, caring, healing presence in your life. The Bible is the same, but the lens we look through and the perspective we look at it from change what we see. So, that's helped me realize, okay, I may disagree with this person, but they're looking at things from a different angle, from a different perspective, from a different culture, from a different theological training. How do you separate your theological training from what's really true? It's hard to do. There are a lot of man-made doctrines out there that people are so sure are true, and then somebody else's man-made doctrine disagrees with it, and they're all fussing. Well, that's like I said earlier, that's why I just want to get back to what Jesus said, and that's hard enough. That's hard enough just to obey Jesus. That gives me plenty to do.
Yeah, and to see the other perspective is so vitally important, the best that you can, because there's some
Yeah.
perspectives that we both can't see from, but we can learn and understand from them. I take a group of men to Alabama. I'm going to take another group in January. To understand the civil rights movement and understand Black history and what happened. And
Oh, wow.
there's nothing you could do that could convince me that slavery was right. But in that same conversation that you look at in the 1800s, you couldn't convince any of those slave owners that it wasn't right. It was from God, that God ordained it. And just because they believed that didn't make that it was the correct thing. And so if we don't look at our perspective and check ourselves on it, and I think that's where your pray part comes in, right? Because we have to think about it, then we have to absorb it, then we have to pray about it to have God give us the guidance. Because I don't know if we don't do those two things that we can actually love like Christ did, because we haven't, we're coming from our own perspective, and all of a sudden we think, like you said, we're this almighty guy that's saying, oh, I'm loving like Christ loved because this is how I interpreted from the perspective I watched it. What's your thoughts when we're trying to, we're actually putting the effort in to love like Christ loved, and we might still be getting maybe a little bit of it wrong? How do we reconcile that?
I think the more maybe it depends on our motives.
We go.
Is our motive? Sometimes in my life, my motive has been to show what a good Christian I am. I'm going to show you. That's not the best motive, because that's like praying on the street corner to be seen of men. And Jesus says that's kind of hypocritical. That's shallow. That's just on the surface. I think if our motive is really to have a relationship with God, to be in communion with God, then, we just keep practicing. Like you said, the first time you try something, you don't always do it the best. And so you just keep making this effort to love, to forgive, to whatever is needed in the situation. And I think the more we do that, the more we practice, the better we get at it. It's a lot easier for me to forgive someone now than it was, say, 50 years ago. And it was hard work. Now it's like, oh, yeah, I forgive you. I can get there much quicker because I have developed that spiritual maturity in myself. And I've, it's like you go to the gym and exercise, those muscles get stronger. Our spiritual muscles get stronger when we use them too.
Yeah. I love that you said the motive, because I think that that's where everything's at, where God sees it and can bless it and can say, continue on, is what am I trying to do? And I think he also convicts us a little bit where we say, hey, I'm trying this, God. You know, I can remember, this is probably, I don't know if it's a great analogy, but I just wrote a book called Be Do Have. And we all try to have these things before we do it and before we become the person that
Mm.
can do the thing, right? And we haven't done what God's asked us to do, and yet we still want to have. And our society is in this have mode, right? And so I can remember, I've told the story a few times, but uh, I wanted to have this BMW, and I wanted to have this car that I didn't deserve to have, that I couldn't be the person that deserved to have it. I didn't do all the work. I had 2 jobs and I was making the money, and then the credit people were willing to give me this money. But my perspective is I would be the person that everybody wanted me to be if I just had this thing. And so the motive of me
Mm.
having it wasn't, because God wanted to give it to me or I wanted to be blessed. The motive is so I could show others how good I was, because I didn't believe I was enough inside. Exactly. And so
Yeah, yeah.
I drive around the parking lot waving at people that I don't know, just so they'll see me. So I feel better about who I am in order to go do something that I probably shouldn't have been doing anyway. I was teaching and I was okay, the part, but at the same time, when we think of loving on somebody, I worked in homeless services for so long, and how many donors would come and give us money, but didn't want to interact with the folks, or then the folks that would want to interact and try to change the whole world from their perspective of this guy is homeless, and then telling that person that is homeless how they have to live. Like, we're going to come in here, we're going to give you this Bible, we're going to give you, we're going to pray with you, and then we're going to leave, and then all of a sudden you're not going to be homeless anymore. I think that was the mentality that they had, as they were going to do it. You go into a prison, right? You go, okay, so we've talked about what God, can be in your life when you get out. And then when they get out, right, you're that person nowhere to be found, or you're not there to be able to help walk them through those early stages. And you say, okay, God, if I'm truly going to love on folks, what part do you want me to be in this? Because I can't do without you, and then I can't do without others that are part of this. And just maybe some
Right.
thoughts on that, the perspective of becoming, because we're not, when we first become Christians, or we first become we're followers of Christ, we're not going to be, we're babies, right? We're not going to be able to love. But if the motive is right, God can take that and just, right?
Yeah, it's true, and it happens, and it takes, um, life experience to mature in Christ.
Yeah.
That's really what it comes down to.
When we talk about purpose, and I think you kind of alluded to it when you kind of told your story at the beginning, and we're trying to find that purpose that God has put us on this earth to do, because there's so many things. He's given us lots of talents, and some people will see our talent and want us to run with it, and some people won't see that as a talent. Sometimes we decide we have this talent, like, I'm a great actor, but I can't memorize any lines, so no, that's probably not my talent. But whatever it is, that I can be good at so many things. How do I know that I'm living in purpose?
Um, well, this may not be the typical answer to that question, but I
Mhm.
think it really comes down to first working on your relationship with God.
Mhm.
Because if you have a working two-way covenant relationship with God, you will hear his voice, you will know what he's telling you to do or not do, and you can talk to him and ask him questions and you'll get answers. Uh, the problem is too often we just plow forward and we haven't really uh, gotten clearance, I'll say, from God. Um, but that's one way to answer the question. The other way I'll answer it is what I've said often to people who ask me, how do I figure out my purpose? And I've done podcast episodes about this. If you don't know what your purpose is, I would say to you, if anyone listening right now, you're looking to get a deeper sense of your purpose, I would say, read the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, chapters 5, 6, and 7 in Matthew. Make a list of all the things he says to do. And then start with a week at least.
Mhm.
For a whole week, just try to do those things. By doing that, you're following Christ. I think that's the generic purpose that we all have.
Mhm.
But as you do that, you'll start to feel an inclination toward things. God has given you talents and abilities and interests for a reason. Um, maybe there's some way that you're going to use all those things for your purpose, but or maybe you'll do something totally different. But the point is, when you are following Christ in your daily life, you're going to be in tune with the general overall purpose that God has for your life. And the more you do that, the I think that the easier it is then to start to realize where you feel God is calling you. Um, and again, I want to make this point. Is a lot of people talk about they have to figure out what their purpose is. I didn't have to figure out my purpose. I just had to listen for what God told me it was. It's not me with the human will trying to figure out what I'm going to do. And it is me putting aside my personal opinions, which is hard to do sometimes, and feeling, where's God directing me? And I may have made some mistakes along the way. I've done some things that I felt like God wanted me to do, and like it seemed like it turned into a dead end. I'm thinking, what? Am I not listening? What's wrong here? But I learned something from that experience that has actually
Mhm.
now helped me uh, in what I'm doing now. So um, I'm kind of running around the bush here a little bit with your question, but I think you know, it's really about those two things I'll say, listening for what having the kind of relationship with God where he will reveal you hear him revealing it to you, and it may come in little bits and pieces. You may not know for 50 years how it all fits together. That's kind of what's happened to me. And I see all these disparate things that I've done in my life that all come together now in what I'm doing now. It didn't mean I wasn't about my purpose earlier. I was to some degree, but um, and who knows how I'll feel 10 years from now.
Oh, I know. I know. Can you live in purpose and not serve others? Or do you have to serve others
Ooh,
in purpose?
ooh. Well, that's an interesting question. I don't. I've never had any. I've never heard that question ever asked before. Uh, I can't say what God's purpose for you is, or what God's purpose for someone listening is. I know for myself, my purpose has to do with helping other people. Jesus, if Jesus is our model, he didn't come and just work things out for himself. He came to show the way for others. Jesus said, I mean, generically, I would say no, that would be really hard. Maybe you could be so spiritually minded, you just sit in your little prayer chair all day long and pray for the world. And not to say that that wouldn't be a benefit, but Jesus said, let your light shine so that the world will see the good works you do and glorify your Father. He said to go out and heal the sick, cleanse the lepers, raise the dead, cast out demons.
Yeah.
Whether you take that literally or metaphorically, and you could say, oh, well, that was just to his disciples. Well, are you a disciple of Jesus? I'm trying to be. I think he's speaking to me when he says those things too. How can I go forth uh and share this light that I have experienced with others? How can I bring the healing message of Christ to others in whatever way that shows up? And so I would find it very hard to be about my purpose and not be maybe serving is not the right word, but interacting with people. At least, well, Jesus said, "I came to be one who serves." Follow my example. So maybe it depends on how you define service, but I think we are here to help each other.
Right. To live in community and be part of a community. And I've asked that question so many times because to me, I don't know how you could be in purpose without serving others. But then like last week, my wife she has an embroidery business. So she has this DTG machine that prints on shirts. And I'm thinking, as we're trying to fix it, I'm thinking about the man who designed all the parts in the machine to be able to make it to go there, and why he designed this part where I have to get the screwdriver to go around the corner and up and down in order to take the thing apart to be able to do with it. And I literally asked myself, and I think I even asked God, I said, that guy who designed this machine, if he was living in your purpose, he's still serving us by giving us this beautiful machine that allows us to serve others in another way. So he can still live in purpose without individually, I guess immediately the first generation of serving others, but serving others in a way that it's such a complex thought for me to say, I can't see myself living boldly in my purpose whatsoever without serving others every single day. I
Well,
think I would fall
yeah,
down. Right.
and there are different ways to be of service. Like you
Mhm.
said, might not be direct contact, but you're still being of service. And so, uh, yeah, it's very hard to live a completely isolated life.
Yeah.
Uh,
And that's what I would think of. Like, I had one guy that I did a podcast with, and he said he was the kingmaker and that his job was to be served by others. And I'm like, you're not living in purposefully, and the way that he treated, he's like, well, my wife, she's lucky to be able to be married to me because she knows I'll take care of her. And so she has nothing to worry about in life as long as she does what I tell her to do. And my thought was, well, that's not serving others. That's not,
he's serving he's serving himself.
he's serving himself. Absolutely. And so I just see that not being where you get the fulfillment, where you get where you can believe you can go to heaven someday, and God says, "I'm proud of you, my faithful servant. You've done well, my good and faithful servant." And I don't know how that happens for the evil that is in our world that continues to happen. And so many people come to me, well, I want to live in purpose. I just don't know what that is. And like you said, the closer I get to God and the more time I spend with Him, the 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 faster and the more I guess He reveals to me exactly what that is. Because if I go do something, even though I might be good at it, and people might say, "Oh, Brian, you didn't." I think that's where the mistake comes in. Brian, man, you were so good at that. You did such a good job. That might be for that day, that time, that God put me there for that purpose. But my other purpose is, how do I do this on a daily basis, doing something else that He's called me to do? And that right away. Just because you have a talent in something doesn't mean. I think so many people do that. They go, okay, somebody praised me for this, so now I got to go do it. I worked the sound at church, and they said I did a good job because they didn't hear the squeak in the mic. I guess I have to be a sound engineer. I don't know.
And
Right.
see, this is again, it gets back to hearing what God tells you to do instead of imagining yourself or taking what other people tell you.
Yeah. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. My gosh. Well, James, oh man, we have been talking an hour already. It's so, yeah, it's such a great weekend. You and I could spend hours together just continuing to talk. But I want to give you an opportunity quick is there anything that we didn't talk about that you want to make sure that our listeners got to know? James and I will talk again. I promise you that. This isn't the only time that we're going to have a conversation together. And so, but for today's podcast and the time that we spent together, what else do we want to make sure that the folks who watch us today know?
God, there's so many things that like you said, we could talk for another hour or two. I guess The thing that comes to me is in all these ideas that we've shared, um, give yourself a little grace and a
Yes.
little space. Don't be
Yes.
so hard on yourself because, you can hear a story that I share. I'm not sharing the times when I fell on my face and didn't do a good job at loving somebody. I've got those stories too, but we didn't talk about that. So give yourself the grace and the space to mature day by day, and just as I just want to reemphasize this whole point of checking out the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5, 6, and 7, and really embracing what Jesus said, because at the end of that sermon, he says, whoever hears what I've said and does it, it's like a man who builds his house on the rock. And when the storms of life come, your house doesn't fall. If you hear what I've said and you don't do it, your house is going to fall down because you built on the sand. I actually saw a house one time that had been built on the sand. It was way out in the middle of the ocean because it didn't have a strong foundation. It was built on the sand. Uh, that's pretty scary to think about, but we're talking about your life, not
Yeah.
just a house. And
Yeah.
so, the more you can practice the the basic core teachings of Jesus, loving your neighbor as yourself, loving God with all your heart and mind and soul and strength, forgiving, those kinds of things. He says, love your enemies. Uh, Go through the Sermon on the Mount, see everything he said to do, and then just work at that and do it. And if you're not good at it, just keep thinking about it, keep praying about it, keep trying. Uh, and I think you'll get a deeper sense of your ability to be Christ-like, and that will give you a clear sense of whatever your purpose may be, to do your purpose with that kind of mindset.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, the Sermon on the Mount is your homework today. Go ahead and read that, Matthew 4, 5, and 6, and begin to do those things. If you've never done that before, what an amazing place to start. How do folks get a hold of you, or should they just watch your podcast? What should folks do to make sure if they want to interact with you more?
Well, I would love to hear from you. If you have any more questions or I'd love to hear what you thought about our conversation. The best way to be in contact with me is to go to my website, and I have created, well, actually, I haven't created it yet, but I will in the next 5 minutes. Uh, I'm going to have a page on my website that's specifically for you, the listeners of Living Boldly with Purpose podcast. If you go to thebiblespeakstoyou.com/boldly, that's one of the words from the name of Brian's podcast. I'll have some resources there. You can sign up on my website to get an email every week when I have a new podcast episode come out every Tuesday morning. There also, I've got a playlist I put together of previous episodes about embracing the mindset of Jesus, how to be more like Jesus, how to how to how to think and pray and love more like Jesus. And I think you'll find that really helpful. And we didn't really touch on this, but I do some coaching, some Jesus mindset coaching. That's what I call my program. And if you're really serious about taking your walk with Christ to a deeper dimension, I would encourage you. There's an option there where you can sign up for a 1 hour coaching call. It's not just to talk about the way it works. It's actually to start walking through these steps of how to think and pray and love like Jesus. And then if that's a good fit, we can talk about, uh, you know, being part of my coaching program. So just go to, in about 5 minutes, if you're watching this live, otherwise I'll have the link up there, thebiblespeakstoyou.com/boldly, and you'll see all those resources there.
Well, thank you, James. Thank you for being on today. For those of you who've been watching lately, we're starting a community called Becoming a Person Universe. If you go to becomingaperson.com, you'll be able to access it. We're going to have so many ways for you to interact with people like James, and I'm convinced James to have some of this on, and go to his website. Take the resources, take advantage. If you're just saying, hey, I don't know what to do when I get up in the morning, I don't know what to do when I go to bed at night, I don't know how to do this thing living boldly, or I don't know how to love like Christ has asked me to love. Hey, we want to help you. We want to be there for you. We want to make sure that there is no reason that you're feeling like you don't know. Not whether you take advantage of it, and if whether you do, but if you have that desire, we want to meet you there halfway, and we want to help you live as boldly as you possibly can. James, again, thank you for being on. Thank you for just sharing this hour with me. I can't wait to do another one with you. We are going to have so much fun over the next however many years that God leaves us on this earth. We're going to continue to have some fun together. And so don't forget, my friend, you are God's greatest gift. He loves you if you allow him to. And we'll look forward to seeing you guys on the next one. Have an amazing, awesome, just incredible day. Talk with you soon.